Welcome to the MSDW Podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, we talked to Rick McCutcheon, Microsoft MVP, longtime contributor and consultant in the space, and also an advisor to ISVs and partners. We catch up with him on site at the eXtreme365 US event in Long Beach, California. As the event is starting to wrap up, we get his thoughts on the conference, including the Executive Exchange, some of the direction put forth by Microsoft here this week on the One Cmmercial Partner and the cloud and CRM product line, and a whole lot more. Okay, I'm here with Rick McCutcheon in Long Beach, California. Rick, welcome. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Good morning, Jason. Thank you for having me.
So we're on the final day of the EXtreme365 US event here in California. It's been, I would say, a busy 3 days or so, and I thought this would be a good chance to just catch up and see what your thoughts were after having some time with Microsoft and some time with a lot of partners. Certainly, I'll share my take first just to get things started. But I would say not a lot of new information, but a lot of work being done to make partners feel more comfortable with Microsoft's plans, Microsoft's direction. That's my high level. What would you say as your sort of high level takeaway?
I completely agree with you because being an MVP, I hear the message all the time. So there was nothing new in the message, no clarity quite in the message yet. But I think what they're trying to do with the One Cmmercial Partner is a big sort of pivot for them. And I think it's something that had to be done a long time ago, and they finally said, okay, we can't have this, group called Dynamics sort of running their own show within Microsoft. We've got to pull the whole thing together so we could support the customer properly and support the partner ecosystem.
Yeah, my take is that from talking to different people here that the One Cmmercial Partner approach is something that's actually very easy to understand, I think, now that people have had a little time to look at it. And now that one thing I thought was great that the EXtreme365 team did in organizing this event was having sort of a very, very meaningful group of One Cmmercial Partner, or OCP, leaders on stage together because they actually represented sort of the formula of OCP, and then they talked to each other as if in their roles, which to me I thought was a great idea. So we had Ron Huddleston, who's the corporate vice president and leader of OCP, and sort of the visionary of it, the one who sort of realized the approach and made it happen, and I guess presumably sold the upper levels of Microsoft executives on the approach maybe less than a year ago, right? I mean, it was really announced in July at the beginning of the fiscal year.
And I think we're getting some clarity on that. Like I said earlier, not a lot of clarity on things, but I think on the OCP program, we're starting to get some real clarity. I do a lot of work with the ISV community, and the build with, market with, sell with sort of strategy is really, really going to help them, because it was always difficult within Microsoft. Where do you go? Because the field sellers were more interested in, we're going to sell X number of licenses or seats to a customer, and they weren't really concerned with the overall solution. And I think the OCP program is more of a vision and a solution sell to the customers.
Yeah, and I just liked seeing that they had representatives of the U.S. subsidiary on stage with Ron Huddleston, and so it wasn't exactly the people who maybe people from outside the U.S. are going to be dealing with or hearing from on a regular basis, but it's the same model, I think, that they're going to replicate, I assume, in other locations, other countries, and so to hear the three, they had the vice president for, like you said, sell with, the vice president for build with, and then vice president for the go-to-market, sort of all up there, sort of representing what their interests are and their focus is. And I mean, it was certainly educational for me to hear that, and I think I think people responded well to it, at least at the high level of saying, okay, now we see the framework here, but that's and that's where the I think the agreement kind of came in from partners who were on site.
So and when I look at the three going up there, and I'm an MVP, so I meet a lot of other MVPs, and I always found that there was far more non-Dynamics MVPs than there are Dynamics MVPs, and they really didn't know much about what we did in the Dynamics world. And now with the One Commercial Partner model, we're all going to kind of report into the same teams at Microsoft. So, what we called our XRM platform that we've developed on for years, everybody's going to find out about it. And, we're finding out more about Azure, and we're finding more about, Windows development and mobile development, what's going on overall at Microsoft. So the message is going to become much clearer to our ecosystem on the partner side as well.
I also think once people actually see some of this OCP stuff actually touch their businesses is when it'll really sink in. Because I think, while people appreciated the model and hearing from leadership, I don't think many people here have actually felt touched by it in their own businesses. I don't think they've seen opportunities come in through it, at least people I've talked to. So I think they're waiting for that.
And, traditionally, some of the larger partners that I've worked with will have up to, 5 or 6 partner managers within Microsoft.
Yeah.
All just concerned about their piece of business. And I think that's kind of going to go away, where it's going to be, here I manage you and I manage everything that you do, which is much, much easier for the partner, especially with the reporting they have to do back to Microsoft on sort of license sales and things. I think this will be a much smoother path going forward.
Okay. One concern I heard was that it's too heavily weighted toward large enterprise interests. Industry focus is very enterprise, seems to be very enterprise focused, and a lot more sort of freedom and maybe play on basically everybody else, what they call small, medium, and corporate.
Yeah. So it's interesting because what Microsoft's calling a small, medium type business to most of us is a fairly large enterprise.
Okay.
It could be somebody with looking for a 5,000 seat deal that is considered mid-market. So for a partner, that's a good piece of business. So I think from a direct go-to-market strategy, I think Microsoft, you're right, is going to focus on that enterprise, and I think they need to do that because Oracle, SAP, Salesforce.com have direct sales organizations, marketing organizations in those spaces. So, Microsoft's really got to come to the table with their own people and the global partners. But that mid-market, it's even better for us as, the average everyday partner, because the Microsoft team's going to say, hey, we've got a partner channel, they know it, and I think there's going to be more pressure on our partners to become more practitioners, right? More business solutions people, and less plumbers, as I'll call them, because there's less with the cloud computing. There's less things we have to build and put together and get working. Now we've got to focus on the customer's business, what they do, how they do it, and how we can take this all these technologies, put them together, and help them run their business better.
Yeah, I got the sense, and you tell me what you thought, that there are partners who really feel like they have to recalibrate right now, that they've maybe been going in a direction that it's been maybe working until now, but doesn't necessarily have a future. I think especially if they were, like you said, plumbers focused on, they had invested in things that now Microsoft wants to own in terms of deploying cloud solutions.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with plumbing. My dad was a plumber, right? Just want to clarify that.
We love the plumbers.
Okay, we love plumbers. But you're right, sort of that managed service provider model is kind of drifting away, right? Because, we're getting a lot of pressure from the Azure world, the Amazon world, the Google world, where they want to do that managed services play. So I think we've got to really find different business models in the field, and they're there, absolutely, because the customers are fairly open to us helping them with what I call the business solution. So it's just a matter of the partners kind of ramping up and figuring out what they're good at, and really focusing on, maybe it's a business vertical now instead of a geographic territory.
Do you see yourself, you work with ISVs, do you see yourself changing any of your guidance or recommendations coming out of this event in any side of it?
AppSource is going to have a huge impact on the ISV market. And, for those listening, ISVs are the people who build add-on products for Microsoft. So, the AppSource is fairly new at Microsoft. It's probably been around for a year now, but They're really, really fine-tuning it. And I think that's where people are going to go looking for solutions. So if I'm looking for an e-signature solution, an integration solution, a vertical solution for health and safety, I'll go to AppSource, find that, and then that'll direct me to the ISV partner. So I think the ISV partner's marketing and technical capabilities of getting the demos up and running on AppSource are going to be sort of really key in the next 18 months.
I'm thinking back to maybe the first presentation that Mike Ehrenberg, the CTO of Dynamics, or Microsoft Technical Fellow, gave, and I think he said on stage, if it's not an AppSource, it may not, in the future, it may not even be able to run in Azure as an ISV solution, which was a pretty strong statement. I mean, it wasn't a promise, it wasn't a policy yet, but he was foreshadowing, I think.
Yeah, I think finally the team now, there's a lot of people that came over from Salesforce.com, and they've seen the success of, I guess, AppExchange in the Salesforce world and what it means to their business. And I think they understand that it helps sell more of their product. Because if a customer's going in and they see a vertical solution, and again, I'll use like a Neosystems health and safety application, that's what I need, right? It's sitting in front of me, and there's going to be a pull-through of CRM licenses when they make that purchase. So I think it's going to help the customer shortlist what they're looking for. It's probably going to drastically cut down buying cycle time. Okay. So and cost of sale, right? So there's going to be sort of less early human interaction within the sales process or in the buying process, which this is the direction the customers are going in anyhow. So us having that website is really going to help direct and focus where we send our messaging. As well, when I talk to the ISVs that are on AppSource already, they're finding it's really 3 different types of people going and looking at their applications. End user customers, which they want, but also other partners going to look for applications, and actually Microsoft's internal teams trying to better understand what's available. So overall, it's a very good thing for the ISV community.
Yeah, and going back to the Salesforce model, that was, and he really didn't talk about it much. I think he's kind of not focused on it directly as his primary focus anymore, but I think we're probably going to continue to see his influence over it. And I recall him when he was sort of just into Microsoft, I guess a year and a half ago, maybe at Inspire 2 years ago or whatever, WPC. And he said very candidly that he doesn't expect it to be something where customers are going to be just buying the solution, installing it, and running with it. I think Salesforce doesn't see that too much either, in most cases, other than maybe the smallest little utilities. But it is part of that sales and sort of discovery process where all those different parties go in, they find out solutions, and they look at whether or not they're viable as part of an overall.
So yesterday I was facilitating a panel for some ISVs in the Executive Exchange, and we actually had that conversation because some of them with the bigger solutions, enterprise solutions like banking, health and safety, agriculture, they don't find that people download their app off of AppSource and the lead begins there. But I think what we're seeing is they go to AppSource and they see your contact information. So now they go to your website, start looking at things, and then the model to consume your content on your website, and they become a lead that way. Mm-hmm. And you never know that they went to AppSource, but I think if we start to do a little research in some of these leads that are starting to come in, you'll see that people originally found them on AppSource and then switched over to their website and engaged there. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense too. So I think it's certainly something that ISVs are paying more attention to if they haven't. I mean, I think there's still a lot that aren't there yet even. For there's thousands at this point, over 1,000 solutions up there, but I think there's a lot more still to go. And some who felt that they weren't applicable to it, they didn't have the right approach to be on AppSource, but maybe they're going to figure out a way, in some way, shape, or form, to put a form of their solution up there just to be just to be up there.
So I think I may be wrong on this, but I think the vision of AppSource is you're going to have one site for sort of widgets or plugins.
Yeah.
You're going to have one section for sort of business solutions, and then it looks like they're now opening it up to consulting services. So where do you specialize?
Right.
Which I think, when a customer's out there in their buying cycle and they're doing their research, I think they're looking for all three. So I think it's a great thing, and I think they're completely on the right track with this.
Okay. So I guess one of the other things that I'm taking away from this week at this event is sort of learning how Microsoft is reorganizing a little more generally. Not in a sense of really disrupting things, but sort of just changing the structure of how people seem to be working. I heard on the R&D side, for example, that the CRM team, the CRM R&D like program managers are realigning so that I think it was Matt Barber, who's a GM for sort of platform, had mentioned in a session that he now works sort of on the same sort of, I guess, tier, or he reports in the same way that like Azure Functions program managers or maybe Power Apps program managers all also report into the same people and are sort of all part of that same level of management. Whereas before, I think he would have been someone who sort of just was in a CRM tier, or sort of a CRM pyramid of managers and executives. Have you heard the same? Those kinds of changes?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of changes going on with the product teams, and we can see that like who's now attending this conference, doing the speaking for Microsoft. Quite a different crowd than we saw 18 months ago. I think we're selling. We don't. For years, we sold CRM solutions, and now we sell customer engagement solutions. I think what we really sell are Microsoft Cloud solutions, right? Yeah. And I think they're reorging internally to say, okay, we're on one team here, and we don't want any different technologies in different teams. And that's kind of plagued us a little bit in the past, right? So one team's developing on this platform, they're calling their development tools one thing, another team's doing something a little bit different. And I think we're going to see that kind of just plain go away at Microsoft and say, here's one platform, we're all on the Microsoft Cloud.
I think an early sign of that on the CRM side specifically is that with version 9 that's just been released, it is now running, I think, really on Azure and not in sort of its own sort of little corner of the Microsoft data center world, architecturally speaking. And from again, just hearing from Matt that during the event, it was a big move for the R&D team, a big sort of technical change for them to get that going. And I don't think it's 100%, sort of done. I think they're still working on it, but that it now really is an Azure-based Microsoft Cloud sort of all-up cloud solution where, I mean, people have been waiting for that for years. It's kind of been sort of not a huge issue, but sort of a known thing that CRM online, Dynamics 365 CRM stuff, wasn't really Azure. It was just sort of its own data center technology.
And I think that caused a lot of problems internally at Microsoft for resources and who's working on what. As well, the MVP community, which I'm part of, and the ISV community, I think they see that as complete positive because now it allows them to really be part of that Azure community,
right,
which is I'll call it a powerful community within Microsoft. And Azure consumption is a good thing because really Azure is that Microsoft cloud.
Yeah, I think it's a benefit all around inside of Microsoft too to have people working on real Azure technology versus their own little corner. It has to be good in terms of R&D resources. It has to be good in terms of all the other sort of development-related operations that go into building and maintaining that stuff. I heard fairly positive things also just from people saying it seems faster. Things like provisioning are working better. I think it may have enabled them to do some of the work that they did into better, just technical things like better. What do you call it? Sort of command line tools and just administrative stuff. So, I think it's not all rosy for V9. I think there's still some. I wrote about this just today, actually. That some people here are complaining it's not quite. They want to see the quality level go up. That it's still got some stuff to be worked out, but I don't think that's Azure specific by any means. I do think that if I was an on-premise person and I heard about this move to 365 in Azure, I would be a little concerned, honestly, about what kind of risk that puts into the on-premise story going forward. Because now they're really in a situation, and AX is, 365 Finance and Operations is a little bit in the same boat where they've got this Azure architecture now, and they are working to backport it to support their on-premise customers, but it's it adds a real wrinkle for that. So it's less straightforward.
And that's interesting because, I do a lot of work through the user group community, as you know, and at the UG Summit, I did a user adoption panel. And in the user adoption panel, we do an enterprise and a mid-market, small market. And there's quite a few enterprise customers still on-prem. But when I look at those customers, they're the ones who came on around 2011, right? Okay. Early versions of the product, been with it a long time. Even the enterprise customers today that are coming in net new, most of them seem to be buying into the Microsoft cloud. Yeah. So I think we're going to see everybody eventually, I think over the next 3, 4, 5 years, move it to the cloud if they're going to stay on the Microsoft platform. An
interesting comment I took away on the AX side, but it could be relevant on the CRM side too, is with AX/365 Finance Operations Enterprise, right now the way to go is cloud. The way is Azure hosted by Microsoft, without partners not playing a role in sort of the architecture itself. The question came up, well, could we do when on-premise is available, could we just host the on-premise ourselves in our own Azure, VM environment and just run the servers there? And the response from Mike Ehrenberg to that question was that they really, really don't want that. That's sort of like, technically it could happen, but if that's happening, they're going to want to really put an end to it quickly. And I think you might see the same on the CRM side, that if you're going to be hosting CRM, you better have a good reason not to. First of all, they probably don't want to see it in Azure. And I'm talking out of my own
right
view here. I'm not saying this isn't their policy, but I imagine something similar coming on the CRM side.
Well, I think it stems out of the fact that when they have these old versions of software out there, they still have to support them.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the support cost on an old version is 3 to 4 times what it is on a new version. Just because every time we make a Windows change or Office change or something starts to affect the old applications, and then you've got technical people building the plugins, right? Yeah. So I think that's where it comes from. But one thought I had when we were talking about moving everything to Azure and one cloud, one of the challenges we have right now is bringing in new people and resources. We just don't have enough what I'll call practitioners, people who understand how to work with this application, from a development language, from a BA situation, even training. We have a big shortage of people out there, and I think it's not going to get any better. I think Microsoft's selling these products much faster than their marketplace for partners is growing. So where are we going to get the new people to come in to work on these applications? And I think it's the people that coming out of the colleges and universities right now are starting to learn these technologies, and now they don't have to learn something different if they're going to work in Dynamics. They'll be able to take that Microsoft Cloud course at their college and be ready to help us in the field.
Yeah, the Academic Alliance program's never been more important, I would guess. And do you do some work at universities as well? Do you have any sense is that right?
Yeah, so I do a couple of things. I work at a couple of incubators for startups. One in particular, the Innovation Factory at McMaster University in Hamilton. Yep. I work in their startup lab. And, we get a lot of young people developing technology, and we kind of help them, guide them through how to make a business out of it, how to, work with the channel and move it forward. And it was nice to see a nice little Microsoft AI application coming through that just won an award. So I'll be working with them probably in the next few months trying to bring that to market. So that's always exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. Maybe is a little bit of a risk, huh? That this capacity problem is not going to go away anytime soon.
I think it's a huge risk because I work out of Toronto, and a couple of years ago, the Canadian government bought thousands of licenses, right? And as soon as they bought thousands of licenses and those projects started to kick in, it started to absorb a lot of the contractors.
Okay.
out of the system, right? And all of a sudden, everybody I know who was in training was off to our capital of Ottawa to do training in government. So it's kind of just absorbed all the trainers as well. So people were rushing around looking for help on projects. So when we see a big organization buy a lot of licenses like a government, it takes a lot of resources out of the channel.
Yeah. Do you think partners are going to have to are on their own to sort of develop their own talent? Do you see Microsoft playing a role in helping with that?
You know what? I don't know what the answer is, but I think Microsoft really has to double down on this and convince the schools that, give the schools, more resources or more skill sets, people coming in to help train the students. But I think we really start to have to focus on that in the next 10 years.
Yeah. I'll have to. I haven't heard from the Academic Alliance folks in a while. I'm going to have to check in and see where they're at, because they do great stuff. And the stories that come out of these universities, I've sat in on a couple of meetings of that organization, are really compelling. The way they sort of, get students doing business cases that also happen to utilize the solutions. It's pretty cool stuff. I'm not sure where they're at right now, though. So, okay, well, I guess the only other sort of hiring related thing I just wanted to cover, and I don't know how much we can talk about it, but one thing I've heard was that Microsoft is very aggressively hiring as well in supporting Dynamics roles. One person I talked to said that in Fargo there's a lot of I guess sales related roles that are really coming up, and I think that's a positive, right? That they're actually ramping up some of these positions that support partners.
Yeah, so when I talk to some people internally at Microsoft that I've worked with for years, who were sort of the technical support people within the CRM world, they've been moved into much larger teams, right? So in the past, someone may have a team of 10 inside salespeople selling CRM. Well, now they're managing 30 salespeople, and everybody's selling CRM. Okay. So they need to, and I think they realize this, that One Cmmercial Partner is a good idea, but once they get into our Dynamics products, longer sales cycles, complex sales cycles, a lot of questions, a lot of competitive analysis. So I think they just need more sales support people, whether it's technical, SSPs, TSPs, traditional titles like that. And I think they're going to start ramping up to really catch up to the opportunity pipeline.
Yeah, I can imagine, the people that OCP hires are going to have certain expectations, and then someone used the term overlayering with sort of Dynamics-focused sales or technical people at Microsoft who maybe are going to have to work with those sort of hard-charging OCP, sell with people and say, listen, this is how it's really going to go if we're going to get this, if we're going to get a deal closed that includes 1,000 or 5,000 or whatever CRM seats, sales seats or whatever, and reset those expectations, because I think the OCP people don't know they don't know Dynamics.
No,
and,
if
they understand the products out there.
If I've been selling Office or Azure and someone wants to know about AX all of a sudden, that's a big change.
Yeah, and
that's a different conversation with a different person.
Yeah. So that's a whole new wrinkle, I think. All right, cool. Well, we're on the last day of this event. Any other thoughts on the eXtreme365 2017 US event?
I think the Extreme events are the best partner events, and I go to a lot of the user group events as well, because I'm highly involved with that community. And those are great for meeting the customers face to face, but it's great to be able to sit with partners and talk about our businesses, because some things are working, some things are not working. What works for you? Do you have a good idea? And especially at the executive exchange level, we have a lot of sharing going on that even surprises me how much people share. As well, and if we're talking about the executive exchange, the interface with the Microsoft executives is really like one-on-one almost, right? You can sit and ask them questions, and I think the best takeaway from that is not what they're going to tell us, but I think they'll have a better understanding of how we make a living and what our business model is all about, and that can only help them go back and build a better program for the partners.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to hear, and I was able to sit in on some of the executive exchange, just as fortunate enough for myself for being here. And I definitely understand what you're saying. And I think, Microsoft, by being at this event and the way it's organized, take a much different role than they would at their own event, in terms of listening, in terms of sort of a communication dynamic that's just different, with maybe letting their guard down a little more trust in having a conversation that's open. So I think that is a unique, a unique component here. And I think just the partners, like you said, partner to partner discussions, I know they happen, but I think they have to foster a certain kind of environment before that dialogue can happen. I think they did that very successfully.
And if we look at the Executive Exchange audience, I think there was close to 50 in the room, probably 2/3 from the U.S., but from Canada and Europe was the other third, right? Yeah. So there are people who, and they have the Executive Exchange twice a year, once in Europe and once in U.S., and we've got people now coming from Europe because they just want to keep the conversation going. So it's worth them flying from Munich to Long Beach just to spend 2 days with other partners to keep that conversation going, which I think is really, really impressive.
Yeah, I think it also speaks to the idea that that they understand that they are all responsible for their own businesses, but there is sort of a collective need out there that they can't ignore, it seems like.
Right, and where else can you interface with people like yourself?
Yeah.
Especially in that room, those partners are all, successful partners, probably all north of 50 employees. So they're not the big enterprise partners, but they're probably the ones that are going after that mid-market.
Yeah.
And they are different from the small business partners. So I think coming together really helps them understand that business model going forward. Yep. And how to grow their businesses.
And I'd be very interested, we can't really touch on it too much here, but I'd be very interested if you could somehow do an economic analysis of what that room's economic impact is compared to, say one large enterprise Dynamics practice or, Microsoft practice overall, per employee or per dollar spent. I'd be very interested to know what that impact comparison would be.
Yeah, just offhand, sort of these global partners. One global partner would be bigger than everybody in that room.
It would,
but for the number of customers, important customers that those partners touch, and those partners are really, we look and we're out working with customers. It's almost like the big global customers are very sophisticated IT buyers, with very sophisticated support systems and their own clouds and all that. So dealing with them as a partner, you're dealing differently. But you get down into that smaller organization, they really depend on their partner to be that trusted advisor, right? So I think the people we saw in the Executive Exchange really have they know their customers more than the global partners would, and they are the trusted advisors for customers. So I think they're really important to the ecosystem.
Yeah, agreed. All right, well, I think we'll end it there. Rick, thanks so much for joining me. This is fun.
Thanks, Jason. Looking forward to our next interview.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again. This has been the MSDW Podcast. My thanks to Rick McCutcheon for joining me today. I'm Jason Gumpert. You can reach me by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World signing off.